Hello and welcome to Sketchbook Revival 2023. I'm Karen Abend, the creator and organizer of this workshop, and it's so fun to share this experience with you and to be in the company of such an amazing group of artists who are sharing with us their favorite ways of creating in a sketchbook. This year, we're also playing with an extra theme, that of color, which I'm really excited about. I mean, after all, who doesn't love color? I know that I'm super excited to learn more about color and feel more confident about it, and I hope you are too. We're going to have a lot of fun together. So in this session, we are joined by a lovely artist from Atlanta, Georgia in the US. Her name is Lauren Leslie. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, everyone. So good to be here.
Welcome. Yeah, it's so good to have you here, Lauren. So I'm going to do a little introduction of you, and then we'll move on over to your creative session. So Lauren is a surface pattern designer with a background in fine art and textile design. And she also teaches classes on Skillshare about pattern design. And she used to work as an in-house designer selling to companies like Anthropologie and Target. And since 2019, she's been licensing her own patterns out of her studio in Atlanta. And one of the things that drew me to Lauren's work is that part of her process is creating original hand-painted motifs in her sketchbooks, which then become pattern designs, which are just so beautiful. And when you look at her sketchbooks, they have such bold colors and really uplifting modern vibe, which is so refreshing. And I'm really excited to see what we create with you in your session, Lauren. So let's get started. So she's going to be telling us about the materials. So I'm not going to go over that, but do be sure to check out the link below the website. You'll see all those listed out, the recommended materials. So yeah, I would love it if you could start us off by sharing a little bit more about your practice, Lauren, and what we're going to be doing in your session. I know it's called Painting Motifs in Gouache, but maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your approach to creative practice and how color fits in with all that for you.
Definitely. So thank you for the introduction. You covered a lot. I'm a surface pattern designer and textile designer. And when you are creating patterns, one of the big things you want to focus on is creating motifs. And if you're going to be hand painting those motifs, your sketchbook is the perfect place to do that. And so, yeah, I love working in a sketchbook. I love just getting away from a screen. You can also create motifs digitally. A lot of artists do that, but I just find it much more, I don't know, relaxing and enjoyable to create motifs by hand. It does take a little bit longer, but that's okay. I'm willing to do that for kind of the effect you get with the hand painted texture and just elements that you can't really get digitally. So, yeah, I guess. What else is my practice? Yeah, so I always start off like sketching in my sketchbook, and then I a lot of times will use gouache for the motifs because it is just such a great medium to be able to layer. You get just beautiful effects in your sketchbook, and it is like a matte finish. And we'll go over some of the kind of qualities of gouache, but if you are creating motifs in your sketchbook, gouache is just a really great painting medium to use. So yeah, anything else that I missed?
No, I think that sounds perfect. Yeah, should we go over to your art table and get started?
Yeah, definitely. Let me share my screen. Okay, so I want to discuss, this will be the sketchbook I'm using, but I'm going to put it off to the side for just a second. And I want to talk about paints and just having like a little palette. So in terms of color, I really recommend working with a limited color palette. I really think it helps just make your designs pop. It makes your designs more cohesive. And so having a little palette like this, where you have 6 colors, you're basically forced to use 6 colors. And then I always have a white. And you can also use a black, but sometimes you can use something a little bit different than a pure black. So what I'm using here is a mixed indigo blue with black. And you can mix all of these colors just from your primary colors, but I am going to show you some of the other colors that I'm using. And I'll tell you which colors that I recommend. So I'm using this Winsor & Newton Flame Red. That's the red I'm using here. So I'm not mixing it with anything else. But it's a little bit of a hot red. It's kind of an orangey red. And so if you're using just a basic primary red, you might want to just add a touch of yellow to get it a little bit hotter. Next, I have an indigo blue. from Winsor & Newton. Hope that's showing up good. And then I just added a dab of ivory black to that to darken it just a little bit and neutralize it a hair. So you can see this is kind of similar to a Payne's gray. That's kind of the color I'm going for in watercolor, and that's what I use as my black in my sketchbook. So instead of using a pure black, you can definitely use that too, and you can have your own palette, but just in case you want to follow along, I'll kind of explain. And then this next kind of purpley blue color, I'm using an ultramarine blue, and then I've mixed it with a little bit of lilac, which is a Holbein color, and a little bit of white. So you always want to have some white. I'm using the zinc white here, but any white in gouache is good to use. And if you don't have the lilac color, you could also just add a dab of red to your blue, your primary blue, and that'll make it a little bit more purpley and add some white. For the next color, I mixed a flesh tint from Winsor & Newton and a brilliant pink from Holbein. So that's the color I'm using here. And it's just a nice pink. It's kind of a shell pink. So it's not like a bright pink, but it's kind of neutralized a little bit. And if you don't have that, of course, you can mix red and white to get a pink. The next color I'm using here is like a peachy color, and it's a Holbein color. I guess it's Jaune Brilliant, number 1. And if you don't have this color, you can just mix a little bit of yellow, a dash of red, and white to get a peach. And then the next color I'm using is a Naples Yellow Deep. And then you can just, use your primary yellow as well and neutralize it a little bit with some white or add a touch of red, whatever you want to do to get that deeper yellow. But yeah, and then you have your palette, and I mix in white here. Oh, and I wanted to give one extra tip. Hold on just a second. So one problem with gouache, this is just talking about the medium, is that once the gouache dries in your palette, it does kind of get cracky and crumbly. And one way you can avoid doing that is just to add a drop of vegetable glycerin to your paints. And that has really helped me. I've just recently started doing this, so I didn't have this in the materials, but I did want to tell you guys about that because the gouache it does reactivate with water, kind of like watercolor. But a problem I was having is it was getting super cracked and crumbly. You can kind of see that here in the middle. And when you reactivate it with water, you can see like where it's a lot smoother here. And you can just spray it once it gets dry with water, and it should reactivate and be a lot smoother. And just with the vegetable glycerin mixed in, it's gonna re-wet a lot better without being like crumbly. So that's one tip about gouache. Gouache you can use like watercolor. You can have it super watered down, but one of the nice things about it is that it's very creamy and can get thick. And that way it'll allow you to add layers on top, even if you are going light on top of dark, which you cannot do in watercolor. So that's one thing I really love about gouache. I'm going to put my palette off to the side here, and we'll get started. Okay, so I have my reference photo pulled up on the computer right in front of me. You can either print it out or have it on a computer or on your phone or iPad, whatever works for you. Okay, and then we can start off sketching with an HB pencil. I always like to sketch out my motifs before I get started, and the gouache covers the pencil marks pretty easily, but you can also use your kneaded eraser to kind of pick up some of the lines like you might do in watercolor. But yeah, okay. So for these chickens, we want to do the chickens in a few different positions. So I just kind of start out with an oval shape. For the body. And then I kind of want to envision where the tail is going to be. So I'm kind of looking at this top right chicken, and your chickens don't have to be perfectly like the photograph. I like to work in a way that's a little bit more stylized for surface pattern design. So I'm not going for realism here, but I just want to get the general shapes that I'm seeing in my chickens. Okay, so there's the main body, and I've just added the tail here. I hope you guys can see that clearly. And then I'm just gonna draw kind of the neck and the head, and kind of do a little circle here for the head, and connect it. And then add the beak. And I'm gonna add some little swirls here for that part. And then I just like to do a closed eye. It's a little bit more stylized and kind of illustration-y. But when you're working in surface pattern design, it's kind of nice to work flat. And gouache is a great medium for, I mean, you can use it in different ways, but it does have a very matte quality. And so it's nice to get like flat shapes and kind of that stylized look. So now I'm just adding the feet. Okay. So you want to try to do some of the chickens in different positions as well. So now I'm going to look at one of these chickens that is kind of pecking the ground. So we're going to do that chicken in a different shape, and I'm going to draw another oval, kind of an egg or like a lemon shape. And when you're sketching, you just want to be really loose. I'm making very light marks with my pencil. I'm not scrubbing down in the paper, but just using very light pressure. And that way I can kind of go back and forth and get my shape the way I want it. Okay. So this chicken's going to be pecking the ground. So I'm just going to draw this little circle for the head and connect the neck.
In terms of placement, sorry, Lauren. In terms of placement, should we be thinking about, are you thinking about where you're putting them, or is it sort of just kind of random from left to right? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I should have talked about this in my process, but when I'm done painting the motifs, I always scan them into Photoshop. I scan them in, I put them in Photoshop, and then I pick up the motif and I move it around in Photoshop, and I actually get the placement and the layout digitally. And so the only thing I would say in your sketchbook is you want to have whole motifs. If you're going to try to do the same process that I'm doing, you want to have a whole motif so that if, for example, I don't think I would do this with the chickens, but with other motifs, if you wanted to layer this chicken, for example, on top of this chicken, you can do that in Photoshop. It's harder if I hand paint this and have something in front of this chicken, then I'm going to be missing that information if I wanted to move that away from that chicken later. And so it's always better to have, I guess, more information than less. And so, for example, if we have enough time, I may fill the remaining space with some flowers and things like that. But it's something that, yeah, I try to keep my motifs separated in my sketchbook.
Thank you.
It just makes, yeah, of course, it just makes for an easier process with surface pattern design. Okay, so now I'm just going to add these feet. Kind of looking at the tail, I'm looking at that right bottom image on my reference photo. And the tail's kind of coming around like this. But again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be super realistic because we are working in a stylized way. And the great thing about gouache is we can always come back and change it. We can work in layers. So if you're not liking something, it's not the end of the world. It's not going to be permanent. Okay, so that's our second chicken. Let's try to do 4. So for my next chicken, I have a little more space here. So I'm going to add one where it's kind of looking back over its shoulder. So we kind of have this half moon shape for the body. And then the head is kind of looking back over its shoulder. So I'm just going to draw the circle here and kind of connect the neck and add the beak there, an eye. And the hairstyle. I don't know what you call that thing.
The crown, the crest.
It's a crest. Is that what you said?
I'm not sure, but I'm making things up.
Yeah. No, that's probably right. I have no idea. My husband was saying today we should buy some chickens because eggs have gotten so expensive.
So you might.
I don't know if we can take that on, but I like the thought.
Yeah. And so chickens, are animals one of your favorite themes or for patterns, or it just depends? You do different stuff.
I've gotten into animals. Yeah. With my fabric license, with PBS Fabrics, animals do well. And so, yeah, I've done animals. I have a Christmas collection. That was the first collection that I licensed with them. And then I did kind of a jungle theme called Belize. And that has like some tropical plants and things like that. But it also has some tigers and some other animals. And then I did another one. Okay, so we're going to start on this next chicken. And then I did another one that is called Woodland Creatures. It was kind of a fall theme. So this I'm going to kind of do an upside down heart. I'm going to do this chicken kind of facing forward, but also looking back. So we have kind of 2 that are forward and 2 that kind of look back that way. But yeah, I like doing the animals. I think too, I've had a baby recently. So I think the farm animals theme has kind of been inspired by, just having a child.
Yeah, so fun.
Yeah. That'll be the head. And then the neck will just kind of be attached there. Kind of added some squiggles for the wing. Put the beak there. And some feet. And you could continue filling up this entire spread with just chicken drawings, but I'm going to stop just so we have plenty of time to paint. And so I have gone ahead and re-wet my gouache paints with my spray bottle, my water spray bottle. And so these have had time to kind of get creamy and reset. I may be adding like a little bit more if I need it from the tubes. But I'll show you too, just these paint brushes that I'm using. This is a size 6 and it's a Raphael Soft Aqua brush, and it just has this kind of square tip. I kind of like this for filling in shapes, and then I do more details with my round brush. This is a size 8 and a size 5. And I may need to grab, I have lots of paint brushes, so I may need to grab more as we do tiny details. But right now I'm just going to try to fill in some of these shapes. And I want, from my palette, I kind of want to do each chicken as a different color. So I'm going to do like one peach, one blue, one pink, and one yellow. And then my darker colors, okay, so that's another kind of tip with talking about color, is that you want to make sure you have enough contrast between your colors. So there's saturation, whether you want to be a little bit more saturated or a little bit more neutralized, as well as light and dark colors. So this is obviously my darkest color. These are a little bit more medium. And then we have lighter colors. So for example, the red would sit nicely on top of the pink or any of these colors. We can also do white on top, which is a lighter color, obviously. And for our blue chicken, we can lighten this up a bit too, but our indigo color is also good for details for the feet and eyes and things like that. So I am going to add a little bit more white to my palette. You can never really use enough white with gouache, which is going to be different from watercolor where you really don't need a white, but it's good for mixing and just adding details. Okay, so our first chicken, let's use our peach color. So I'm just stirring this up. And one other tip with gouache is that your light colors are going to dry a little bit darker and your dark colors are going to dry a little bit lighter. So it takes a little bit of just getting used to it and just knowing to expect that when you're painting, and you get used to it pretty quickly. But for example, if I kind of wanted this color, I might add just a little bit of white on my palette so that I know that it's going to dry a little bit darker. And we can always add more, but I'm just adding a little bit of water and a little bit of white and getting a nice kind of creamy base layer that's not too thick. And then I'm just going to fill in the shape of the chicken. And if you want to lift your pencil marks with your kneaded eraser first, you're welcome to do that. Because of timing and all that, I'm just going to leave it for now. But so you can see that's drying a little bit darker than the initial. And it's always good to start with a little bit of a thinner layer with gouache, and then you can always thicken up as you add your layers. So you don't have to do a super thick layer to begin with. In terms of adding layers, you do want the paint that you're adding on top to be a bit thicker because this does reactivate with water. So that's a nice option. But if you are adding some details on top, you don't want to necessarily reactivate the under layer, or it might get a little bit muddy. Okay. And I always like to clip down my sketchbook pages as well. I'm working on cold pressed watercolor paper. It's a pretty thick paper, so I probably don't need to clip down, but I'm just in the habit of doing that. You can also use like a mixed media paper, or any kind of watercolor paper is really good to use with gouache. And it's kind of an easy, like forgiving paint. I've even used it in like a regular drawing, like moleskin sketchbook, and it's worked pretty well. Okay, so now I'm going to grab my pink. Just dipping my brush in water. And I'm going to grab a little bit of this white as well so that it's a little bit lighter than the initial paint, because I know it's going to dry darker. We'll do this guy in pink. I probably want my beak to be, I don't know, I might do it red, or like if you wanted to do it yellow, I would just maybe leave that. You can layer with gouache, but with it being a lighter color, you might as well just like let the white paper kind of work for you. So you don't have to go too thick.
That one is so sweet.
Oh, thanks. Okay, next we're going to do our blue, and the blue I've mixed is a little bit dark, so I'm going to add some white to my blue on my palette here. Okay, this part of the tail is kind of coming in shadow. It's kind of underneath, so I'm going to hold off on that for a second, and just kind of get these lighter blues. Okay, I'm gonna let that dry. I'm gonna do this final chicken in the yellow color. And also add some white to that just to get a lighter base. Okay, so I think these are some nice shapes that we're starting out with. And now that this peach chicken is pretty much dry, I think I can start adding some details. So I'm going to grab my red color and just fill in the, I guess it's the crest. And I like to use my round brush for more like specific areas where I feel like I need to draw and get like a little more precise. You can also get a paper towel or some kind of rag if you need to kind of get some of the excess water off of your brush. Let me grab mine. Okay, and then I think I want to add, oh, maybe I'll just leave it. Okay, so since I'm already using my red, I'm going to jump around to different motifs and add red sections for my other chickens. So I kind of just like to hop around, and instead of having to wash off my brush and do that extra step, I can go ahead and fill in while the other areas of paint are drying. We want to, before we start to layer on top of our base layer, we want to make sure that paint is dry. Otherwise it'll mix and get a little bit muddy. You might not do what you want.
So do you already have it planned out in your head, like where the colors are going to go, or do you sort of decide as you go?
I kind of just decide as I go. I have an idea. One thing with color is that I do try to have some shared colors within each motif so that they relate to each other and so that your eye will move around the composition once I have my layout done in Photoshop. But yeah, I kind of just
You're just playing.
probably a little bit of both. Yeah, like I have an idea, but you can always change it if you don't like something, but
Oh, thank you.
yeah. Sorry, I don't know if that answers your question.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm just curious,
okay.
like, when you're painting along or you're just like, you start wondering like, oh, I wonder why she's doing that. Or, just like being curious about
Yeah, of course. I've just been doing patterns so long, I guess it's just sort of innate and I don't really think about it. But yeah, I probably subconsciously have an idea of where I'm gonna put things. Okay. Yeah, so all of the motifs will have some of this shared red color. I might even do this guy's beak red because this is a yellow body that's going to have more contrast to it. So I wouldn't want to do like a yellow beak. But you can play around with your palette. Oops. You could do a blue beak if you wanted to do something like that, but you want to just make sure that you can see it and that it's contrasting enough from the from the body. And then, having a limited color palette is nice because once I get these in Photoshop, I can copy and paste some of these motifs and then have them placed within the pattern. So it's not just like one design. I can even copy and paste it and then flip it. So in a pattern design, that looks like your eye doesn't necessarily register that it's the same motif. You can play with the scale, and yeah. I like doing the hand painted motifs and then using the tools, the digital tools, kind of to make my life easier for finishing up a pattern.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I also work with Pantone once my motifs are in Photoshop and I'm working digitally. I don't know if that's something, everyone would be interested in since this is more of a sketchbook class, but I do try to find Pantone colors that match my paints. And because I'm working with paints, I typically, like for my red, I might choose 3 Pantones so that it can get a little bit of variation for the painted effect. But that's something that if you guys are ever interested in doing, working with a company, doing like fabric design or any other kind of product design, companies typically will use Pantone. And it just gives you, if you choose the Pantones up front, it kind of just gives you more control over your color. Especially with working in a hand painted way. If you're mixing paints kind of like I am, there could be some variation. And we don't always know what the scanner is doing in terms of color and bringing it into the program, but kind of forcing that Pantone color on top of your painted motifs kind of it just gives you a lot more control with how the color is going to turn out and making sure that it's cohesive and really the same colors across maybe many different patterns that are going to go into a collection.
Interesting.
Okay, I think I'm going to do this beak red as well. Okay, and we'll do this one with the red, and then the other 2 chickens I'm probably going to give a yellow beak. So that way we have 2 red and 2 yellow, and that gives us a nice balance in the color. But this process you can really do with any motif. You could be doing florals, you could be doing geometrics, you could really do such a range of different motifs in the same method. Okay, so what else do I want to paint red while I have red on my brush? Let's go back to our peach chicken, and I'm gonna kind of draw this wing and just kind of do like a stylized wing. I'm not trying to do realism here, and I'm just gonna do some nice marks. You can kind of do any marks that you want there. And I'm gonna do some kind of lines for the neck. And so for these, I'm really just kind of making them directional, so that your eye kind of follows these kind of hatch marks or mark making techniques and suggests, what's really there. So sorry, I'm right-handed, so my hand might be getting in the way, but I'm going to do this wing next. And instead of doing the same kind of mark making techniques, I'm going to do little rainbow shapes. Just making them very directional, so your eye kind of follows the marks in a way that would be the wing. Okay, and then I want to make sure we can kind of see the head and that the head is separated from the body, the shape of the body. So I'm going to just do a line under the chin so we can see that that's separated. I don't do like a ton of outlining for my motifs, but you totally can. And then I'm going to add some more hatch kind of lines around the neck, getting that curve so we can kind of follow the curve of the neck. And I might just add some in the tail. We might need just a few more. Let's see. The feathers are kind of going up that way, up the tail, so I might just add some more there. Okay, so where else do we want red in our motifs? I might do just a little, I'm trying to think. Maybe I'll do it on the yellow guy too. So let's do this wing in red. All these warm colors work really nicely with red kind of being your details. They show up, the red shows up really nicely on the peach and yellow and pink. And it has a nice contrast. I don't think it would work so well on the blue, so I'm going to do a different color there. And I'm going to just draw my line to separate the neck from the rest of the body right there. You can also come back and add white as details. White is a nice like contrast color as well. And I might add some white in different areas as well. So then we have like a dark detail and a light detail. I will use my indigo blue for the eyes. I don't think a red eye would look that great. And then I'll probably use it also for the legs and the feet. So it's not just in one place, but it kind of hops around. So I guess we could do that next. I'm going to get some indigo. And I just, again, mixed indigo and black. And with the vegetable glycerin, this is, what I put a drop in my wet paints for, and it just reactivates so nicely. So definitely recommend doing that. I'm just going to do a little eye on all of my chickens. And I'm going to do the feet. And then I'm just going to add some white details just to show you guys how you can work light on top of dark. So I'm going to grab this thick white paint that's still wet. I'm adding a little bit of water just to kind of get it creamy, but you definitely want it to be thick when you are doing more details. And going on top of a previous like paint. Okay, and you can always add like more layers. So if the first layer doesn't show up that well, we can go back on top of it. But I'm just gonna do some kind of, let's see, I might have gotten a little too thick. It definitely needs to be able to draw. There we go. Okay, and then kind of for the belly, I'm just gonna do for these swoopy things with my brush. And I'll do, maybe I'll do more dots on this guy. And for the tail, I'm just gonna kind of do some squiggles. And then as this dries, like just like I said, the light colors are gonna dry a little bit darker and the dark colors dry a little bit lighter. So you might have to go with the white and add a second layer to really get it to show up the way you want. And if you mess up, you can also just stick your finger in the paint and wipe it up while it's still wet. And I'm like working in oils or acrylics. Hmm. Okay, so for this shadow part of the tail, I'm just gonna go straight into my blue and not mix any white. And we'll see kind of how much darker that is. We can always go darker by adding a touch of indigo to our purpley blue. But I think this is gonna be dark enough. Yeah, I think that's plenty dark compared to the lighter color. And so I'm just going to use this color straight from my palette and do some details. Okay, so for this guy's feathers, I think I'm just gonna kind of do similar to the wing, just some kind of swoopy line work. Okay, so I'm just kind of following this egg shape and going up like that. And then I'm just going to add some kind of hatched lines in the tail so that our eye kind of goes in that direction, kind of encourages us to look forward like that and kind of follow the direction of the tail. Then I'll add some lines in the neck. And clean off my brush, and then I'll go back to the dark indigo. Again, you could use black if you wanted to, but I just don't love using a straight black. I think it's more interesting to use a quote unquote black that's more indigo or sepia, something a little bit cooler or warmer, just to add that color. I'm going to do the eye. And the feet. Yeah, so we have our 4 chickens. This is technically enough to make a pattern. I would recommend doing at least 4 motifs for a pattern because that way you can repeat it and put it around the page. I would probably also add some florals to this kind of design or some other just like smaller elements to kind of contrast against the larger elements. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much the way I make motifs in my sketchbook. And again, I like to have them separate so that I can grab the whole motif in Photoshop and place it around my layout and do what I want. I can even copy and paste it. I can flip it. I can scale it up or scale it down. I can turn it if I want to. And so, yeah, I mean, and when I'm working in Photoshop to create a pattern, it is a more perfect square. But what I like about working in a sketchbook first is that I don't have those restraints. So I can make as many motifs as I want, just filling up this whole layout. And then if I don't like one, who cares? I can use a different one. You know, I don't have to use it. So this is a place to kind of concept and play and make your motifs, but it's not your final piece. So that's what a sketchbook is all about, really, in my mind, is just kind of playing, and you get some good things, you get some bad things, and that's totally okay. But this is how I like to use gouache, especially for surface pattern design. I like the flat quality. It's a little bit more stylized, and that works well for making patterns. And yeah, I just like that you can layer on top, and I don't know. Any other questions, Karen, that you have for me or my
No,
process or the paint?
No, I think you explained everything so beautifully, Lauren. Thank you. I'm just, yeah, so they're so cute. Your chickens are darling. I love them so much. So, and how you use,
Oh, thank you.
so fun to see the way that you brought in the color and tied it all together. So I think it's been super informative and fun. I would love to invite you to come back up so we can do the,
Yeah, let me,
yeah.
there we go. Hi.
Hi, that was so fun. So I want to show you mine. So mine's not done yet. But oh, and it's very bright. The colors look brighter than they are. But anyway, that's about as far as I got. So fun.
Oh, that's so cute. And I love how different yours look from mine. So, and I love that you did different colors as well. Yeah, that's really cute.
Yeah, even though I was following along and trying to do, what you do, it ends up being different because it just does.
It does. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm waiting for my paint to dry in a few spots. But anyhow, I want to invite everyone to share your chickens in the Facebook group so Lauren can see and I can see. We can't wait to see what you create and what colors you use and how you do with gouache and all that good stuff. And I'd love it, Lauren. I love to ask the artists to leave us with a final tip. Like if people want to keep going with making motifs and gouache or something else, or playing in their sketchbooks, what would be your top tip for everyone to, encouragement to keep going?
Yeah, I mean, I say just fill up your sketchbook. I try to have a daily painting practice, but it doesn't always happen every day. So don't take that like so extreme, but give yourself some grace. But, just trying to come back, maybe after a long day, if I've like watched a little bit of TV or this or that, just come to my sketchbook and allow that time to play, to unwind, just trying to get back to the page and just have that consistent practice is, probably just, I don't know. I mean, you're not going to improve or I feel like you're going to be frustrated with yourself. At least that's how I feel if I'm not coming back to the page every day and just seeing that little bit of improvement. And yeah, I think just working with a limited color palette, like trying to do that. It takes a little bit of time if you feel confused about color or don't always know how to get there. You can always change it or add a color or delete a color or mix a new color, don't feel like you can't do that. But once you have a palette that you're really liking, I mean, just really trying to stick to that limited color palette really helps, bring out your style and helps your motifs stay cohesive so they relate to each other in a finished artwork. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That's a great tips for us to keep going. Thank you so very much. And I know you also have a wonderful free gift for everyone. If people want to keep working with you and creating with you, can you share with us what that is?
Absolutely. So I have a free workshop called Sketchbooking Your Style. So I'm so passionate about teaching artists how to develop their own style. I know that a lot of artists are so talented, but they feel like they can do any style or they just don't know like the direction they want to go in. But I think, you can still be a good artist, a good designer without having a style. But I do think that if you want to make your mark on the world and kind of be known for a certain look, then creating your own or developing your own style is really imperative to that. And so I go through, just a way to do that in your sketchbook that's really hands-on. That's feels like less pressure because your sketchbook is a place to play. Sketchbooking Your Style is the free workshop, and you're welcome to sign up. And yeah,
Awesome.
I'd love to have you.
Yeah, thank you so much. So the link for that is right below the video. You can click on that to sign up for Lauren's fabulous free gift for us, which sounds amazing. I mean, who doesn't want to learn more about their style and kind of get to know their own way more? It sounds like really, really awesome. So thank you so much for that generous gift. And that concludes our session. So thanks for everyone for joining us. I hope to see you on the next one. And bye for now. Bye, Lauren.
Okay, bye guys. Thanks so much.